to come. If they show up, they show up. But the open forums, those are the ones that we will be inviting the media to.
So can you go back to when the open forum is?
Sure. The public open houses we have slated for the fall of 2013 and the winter of 2014. So we've got a little bit of time to take the information that we gather from the advisory committees and put it all together so that when we do present to the public, it is a little more focused. Right now we have this big ball and we're trying to get a little more focused.
What are the advantages of jumping to a public engagement outreach before getting this committee to a point where it's has more or less a consensus with the information that we're looking at, like today, for instance? Is that how? I'm just wondering what the thinking is behind that.
Well, if I could piggyback on what I saw here, Blair, your question, but I have a sense that you're thinking a little bit the same thing that some of the others may be thinking, and that is that going out and having meetings at this point, to me, and maybe I don't understand the broader context, has a little bit of sense of the cart before the horse, and that this type of process is going to be necessary and beneficial, but if it is beneficial in the context of a broader plan and strategy, and so then the question comes of how does this fit in the sequence of planning and selling activities, engaging activities. So to see it in this isolated way of outreach leaves me, there's something missing here in terms of how this fits with the broader plan.
Right. Well, I think the hope, from the stakeholder and the community advisory groups is that they will help us in formulating something that we can, that comes back to you all. I mean, I know it seems like we're doing this kind of backwards, but I think the hope is that the message that, and the technologies and the discussion about what needs to happen would come from those groups, and then we can feed it up to you all. It's just that we're at the infancy in this whole study, and we're hoping that these groups would help us flush out some of the details that's desired in the communities themselves.
Give me an idea how this meeting is to take place. Would it be an hour long or 2 hours long? And is it PowerPoint? Does it start with a fixed guideway study and go forward? Is that kind of what you're thinking? Kind of bring them up to date for information?
Brian, if you'll go forward, there's a draft agenda that's included right here. This is what we're looking at as far as agenda goes. We're thinking about starting out with the project background and the project story, so to speak. We're going to review the committee's mission and goals. We have a public involvement plan that we have developed and formulated and quite honestly are moving forward with. And for each one of these committees, we've actually lined out goals and objectives for these committees. And I am more than happy to share that with this committee. Holly, am I speaking out of turn? Okay, but I am more than happy to share those goals and objectives for each committee with this group, because I feel like that's very important for you guys to see. And then we're going to move on to a group discussion of corridor-specific goals and objectives. Basically, we're going to do the same thing with these groups that we did with you guys. We're going to have these meetings in round tables, and they're going to come up with their own goals. Okay? We're going to share with them our goals that we came up with, that this committee came up with, but then we're going to dig deeper, okay, and go more into the community and see what their goals might come out to be, and also see how they align with yours. Then we're going to talk to them and give them an overview of the facilities and transportation modes being considered. We're going to talk about the bus, we're going to talk about light rail, we're going to talk about all those good fun things. And then we're going to have group discussion of the draft alternatives and the evaluation criteria. How are we going to disseminate, so to speak, of all the information?
If I could just make an observation, I think some of this language is a little bit confusing or even off-putting. Because if you're gonna be in an advisory role, then you're providing, you're advising.
Correct.
And it seems like it's more of a, and now, I mean, I'm just an observation, so if I'm wrong, correct me, but it seems like it's more of an availability session, where you're just providing information to people who are completely, they're not prepared to advise because you're just now hitting them with it.
Well, that's why we're doing it 3 times, or twice, I'm sorry, twice.
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, that's the purpose of the summer meeting, is to get them up to speed.
To introduce
And
them
then as we get
to
more
these.
detail on the project, they can advise us before we go to the public. Do the public open forums. So, I mean, that's the purpose of this first set of meetings, is to bring them all to speed, gauge their interest. And from our perspective, from the technical perspective, we just want their ideas. What do they think it should look like? Who should it serve? What's the most important goal within that corridor that we should be trying to reach? What are the needs we need to accommodate? That type of thing.
So they have you have a first meeting, which brings them up to speed, and a second meeting, which kind of takes some of their input and advice, which then that information then comes back here,
Yes.
and then we get to look at that and give you input and advice back before then you go to
Then we go to
the public forums.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes. So therefore, we have a lot of input before we ever go out to the public.
Speaking personally, I think we've got to get it beyond this group. I mean, we've got to get it out there, even if it's half baked, or even if there's just a lot of it is conceptual right now. We've got to get a larger conversation going and determine the level of enthusiasm and outrage. But we need to flush that out and see what it is, and see where it is.
Exactly.
And deal with it, It always helps to know who's gonna be for you and who's gonna be against you, and try to build a consensus, I don't see, there's some risk here, because it's not, we don't have much of a finished product at this point, but I tend to see that there's some advantages to getting this feedback and getting a conversation going too.
Well,
But
and
we, it's 4:22, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time, because we try to get out of here at 4:30. If we don't want to do this on the timetable they're suggesting, we need to decide, like in the next few minutes, because we don't meet again until July, and they need to know. So, Blair, I interrupted you. You were going to say something.
I would say that the level of detail that this was presented with, where it feels like a lot of those issues related to political sensitivities and other things have been flushed out. I'm not quite there with this, and I think it'd be better.
Let me stop you there. We're not presenting anything that we did earlier today about the.
Oh, I understand.
Okay.
I guess my
Just wanna make
point is just that it's hard to know to what extent, what risk this is, and to what extent it helps us be successful without understanding it within the bigger scheme of a multi-year campaign that involves a high level of engagement in all of these districts. So,
Your concern is we could really cripple our long-term goals if we do this and it goes badly. I don't know that we could cripple ourselves completely, but we certainly don't help ourselves. And we're in a city that it's a difficult proposition to start with. That's why it's been so much hard effort over the last years and decades.
So is there any value of moving down this agenda, but doing so more or less with a test group? In other words, doing this an aggressive agenda. How many total meetings are you launching here?
6.
6. Is there a value in picking out an area and quote unquote doing a demonstration meeting to ascertain, do we have the right agenda, do we have the right ability to generate consensus within that group and idea flow? Do we have appropriate attendance from those that you're targeting to attend? Very quickly come back and ascertain that yes, this really does work, and so therefore let's go ahead and launch with the other 6. And at the risk of being stoned here in this meeting, I mean, I know you've got a lot of tick-tock time going on and a lot of planning on the table, but would it be better to simply aim small, see if you can get a demonstration meeting together and determine if this is the proper formula for moving forward to this group?
Well, we could certainly do that. I'll lend on the success or failures of the consultants and the work that they've done through the years. I mean, it was suggested by them to go this route. But I will say, though, that, this study, we have to have public input.
Sure.
It's an 18-month study, and there's going to be an answer at the end of that 18 months. So I don't understand the concept of not having the meetings.
I think there could be some probably additional concern here because we all have a better idea of when we're looking at the RTA and where all of it goes, but that's kind of a separate piece from what this really is just a way to get yourself prepared for federal funding if you so choose to ever go that way. And I mean, we have a little bit different perspective than the people who are going to be looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, having done many of these meetings in the past, if I had a nickel for every time someone asked me to give them more detail about what we're studying that I didn't have, I'd be a rich man. I mean, you have to go into these meetings saying, look, we're conducting a study, we're looking at transit alternatives in these corridors. First of all, what do you think are the needs? Do we need transit at a higher intensity in these corridors? It's a real basic question. And you have to be prepared for them to say no. I mean, that happens a lot. And you have to take that with a grain of salt and keep moving forward as you work on these. But I mean, the question, I know this sounds like it's a lot of technical stuff with the goals and objectives and all that, but it really comes down to some basic questions. Are there needs for transit, high intensity transit in these corridors? Where do you think the station should be? What should the transit look like? Where are you trying to get to on an everyday basis? Those basic questions to just start gauging what people are thinking, having them help us frame that discussion. If they think, there's a lot of people who need to get to work downtown, so it's pretty basic, but we can establish our evaluation criteria to test the alternatives that do the best job of getting people downtown. So that's what we're after out here. Is what are we going after in these investments?
In the interest of, and I agree with the mayor, I think we need to start getting this out there, but is it your expectation that the same people are going to come to all three meetings?
Yes.
Yes.
So you're looking at exposing them, educating them, bringing them along with us?
Correct.
I guess the part that bothers me most is your last item there, group discussion of draft alternatives evaluation criteria. I don't know that isn't going to be premature for this first meeting. They're not going to have something to think about yet because you're just giving it to them. Whereas, as someone has said, we've been at this for, we've been brought along. I don't know what your agenda is for the next two meetings, but it seems to me you have to give them something to think about, let them think about it, and then get their creative or opinion in.
I would say, based on Doug's comments, and I feel very comfortable that it will be there by the time the meeting takes place, based on what Doug's saying, so. I voice my skepticism, but I just say I support their ability to get it done and get it done right. So I know nobody cares more about these issues than Doug, so I trust his ability.
On the invitations, is the website going to be on the invitations?
Yes.
They'll have a chance to look at it, if they plan on attending.
Again, I would just ask for a caveat
Yes,
that I'd like some opportunity to see who's on the invitation list, because we're in the midst of an ongoing process that where people have spent a lot of time already on these issues. And if they're not even a part of this group, then that's not helpful to us or to your process.
Right.
Sure, no, we'd be happy to do that.
Well, and please realize we're very flexible when it comes to this.
Yeah.
We have to be. So if you have any names you want to add to that list, we are more than happy to help.
Just quickly, Doug, you mentioned the fixed guideway study as kind of a basis for this. So you're going to introduce that or reintroduce that to the stakeholders and the community group. And so you know, they may not have the alternative analysis that you're doing now, but they will have a basis
Exactly.
for,
And you can put a link on your on the website to that, so
We'll post
everybody can pull that. Okay.
Right, and please realize too, our language will be at a 10th grade level, so to speak, to make sure that it's easier to understand. We speak in a different way with you guys because you have come all this way. So even our agenda will actually be simplified, so to speak.
Who is the point of contact on the website? Is that the consultant or ACOG?
That's a good question.
Well, we're going,
Right now it's-
yeah, I mean, we're gonna host the site.
Yes, I believe right now it's ACOG. Okay.
I know, it's a lot.
So just modification of my comment earlier, I appreciate your explanation. My sense was that these meetings were something more, perhaps more of a selling process, but an early on input process. I agree with Mayor's comment, there's probably a little downside to it, and over time, a lot of upside, including Marion's points about laying groundwork for processes you have to probably go through if we were ever request federal funding. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see what the input is you get.
I think that's true. I think the hope is that, you know, these groups will become invested in this whole idea that we're talking about. You know, there will be some dissenters, I'm sure, on the group, and that's fine, we need those too. But, you know, we hope that this is a group that we can rely on as we go forth, not just for this study, but for this, as Blair, someone said, for this campaign, you know, that we're talking about.
When I see the timeframe you were looking at doing these again,
Yeah, you know, if we can't get there for these, I mean, we're cutting this close. If we can't get it out by the end of this week, then we may reevaluate these dates and push it into July.
well, I would like Mayor Rosenthal's timing to be addressed here.
Yes.
Later, you know, if the other corridors can go first, if that's helpful, or,
I mean, I just want to make sure that there's overlap between our planning process, the people.
yeah, I can see where you'd be concerned about the confusion. I'm just saying, so what I'm saying is, if we push yours to last, does that help?
Hers is already last on June
Is
26th.
it last now?
Mm-hmm.
It's last now by chance.
I like the date that you signed this.
Okay.
Good.
It's just more making sure the right people are invited.
Yes.
Because we've got about 50 people that have gone through a year, at least 6 months, or some of us more longer than that, going through a comprehensive transportation plan that includes transit very heavily in the deal. So those people are up to speed. They're gonna understand this right away. You can go on down the road, because we've been involved in that for a while. So you make sure those people though, which a lot of them would be stakeholders of the community anyway, but we need to make sure and have them invited.
Okay. All right. Well, we can do this two ways. We can allow them to go ahead as they're planned, or if someone really feels like this is too much too soon or has other reservations, we could have a vote amongst the committee. Does anyone want to have a vote by hand or by verbal? Okay, then why don't we just, we're passing along the instruction to go ahead as planned.
Great, very good. I know time's getting short. We're not quite finished with our consultant's agenda item. I know Andrea's got some discussion about the parallel facilities that we want to get out there, so go as quick as you can, Andrea.
Gosh, okay,